Okay, so I was born March 25th, 1981. I can't draw very well, so my friend Kim is going to do that part. March 25th, 1981. My mom said that she was watching a horror movie when she went into labor with me. So there's that. I had 3 siblings, and we lived in a lower middle class part of Connecticut. My dad was a restaurant supply salesman. He sold forks and knives and dishwashers and stuff like that. He worked a lot, and my mom was pretty hands-off when it came to parenting. I'd describe the majority of my childhood as wonderfully unsupervised. I was a pretty bad kid. Like, there were these train tracks in our backyard, and we'd hang glass jars of mayonnaise off of the bridge, so the jars would smash on the windshield of the train as it drove by. Also, this one time, my brother and I lit the tree fort on fire. We didn't mean to. We just wanted to have a small fire in our wooden tree fort. I didn't hate school, but it wasn't great. I was always in trouble. Breaking something, school trouble, teacher trouble. I remember vividly this constant anxiety I felt for most of my early school years. It was a constant tension that my parents or teachers were going to find out about whatever trouble I was up to. Getting in trouble really escalated when I got to high school. I was always in the vice principal's office, then detention, then suspension. Freshman year was pretty uneventful, but by my second year, I was trying to find my place in school and started hanging out with some of the really bad kids. I got into a lot of fights, and it was around this time that I discovered smoking weed and drinking alcohol. This was also around the time my parents told us they were getting a divorce. That didn't go well at all. I put all the blame on my mom. I really didn't like her then. One night we got into this big argument, and she ended the fight by saying, "Do what I say or get out of this house." And I left. I was 15 years old, and I ran out at 9 o'clock at night on a Tuesday. Okay, so 15 years old and on my own. I stayed with some friends for a while and eventually moved in with these 2 slightly older girls. Naturally, one of those girls became my girlfriend, and a few weeks after I moved in with them, my girlfriend got in a fight with her roommate, and she told me she wanted to leave. So her and I got in her Honda, and we left. We drove from Connecticut to Virginia, where my big brother Van was in college. I was happy in Virginia, but after 3 months there, my girlfriend got pregnant. So we moved back to Connecticut, and I dropped out of high school. We lived in her friend's basement for a while and eventually found an apartment. I worked in this seafood restaurant. I was a dishwasher. I made $8 an hour. Then, the following April, just after my 17th birthday, Owen was born, and I was a dad. Now, I don't know that teenagers are emotionally equipped for the magic that is having a child, but the feeling I had in the hospital just after he was born, it was similar to Christmas morning when I was little. It was like that feeling you have when you get exactly what you want. We moved into a trailer park. It was cheap and in a less dangerous neighborhood. And we were poor. We were really poor. We were even on welfare for a little while, but I never liked the idea of handouts. Slowly things settled. Life was okay. I made a little bit more money in the restaurant, and when he was about a year and a half old, we drove into New York City and stayed at my brother's apartment in Brooklyn. It was our first vacation. My older brother had just gotten an iMac, one of those funny-shaped blue ones. Actually, this is the exact iMac. This is the first iMac you could edit video on, and we made this little movie of taking Owen to the zoo. I loved the process. When we got back to Connecticut, I immediately maxed out my only credit card and bought my own computer. I spent all my free time making these little movies. And for the first time in my life, I felt like by telling these stories, I had a voice. Then, for a lot of good reasons, Owen's mom dumped me. It sucked. I didn't know what to do. Now, before the breakup, I had this plan, this dream, to move to New York City in like 5 years. But I just kind of said to hell with it and decided to move to New York City immediately. It was June 2001. I was 20 years old and I moved to New York City. I was here to become a filmmaker. Filmmaker sounded so much cooler than dishwasher. This was, without a doubt, the hardest time of my life. I didn't know anyone, I didn't have a plan, and for the first time ever, I didn't get to see my kid every day. He stayed in Connecticut with his mom, and I'd go back to be with him 3 days a week. It made me so sad. I didn't want Owen to grow up and think his dad was a loser. That town in Connecticut it felt like a dead end. That first summer in New York City, I worked as a bike messenger, and eventually this artist named Tom Sachs, somebody my brother knew, hired me for $10 an hour. I put aside $100 a week because that's what it would cost to get back to Connecticut to see Owen. No matter what, I wouldn't touch that travel money. At the end of that summer, my 3-month sublet was up, and I moved into a friend's couch in the financial district of downtown Manhattan. My buddy said that I could stay there for a month, and the day I moved in was September 2nd, 2001. The blast from the first plane knocked me out of bed, and by the time the second plane hit, I was on my bike trying to get away. The blast from the impact of the plane knocked me off my bike to the ground. My dad called me that morning, and he said to me, "It's time to come home, time to move back to Connecticut." And I thought about it, but I figured I could barely afford to eat, I didn't have anywhere to stay, no education, few prospects. I thought there's just no way it could get any harder than this. And if I could figure out how to get through this, I'd be okay. And so I did. I committed everything to New York City, to my big dream. And that's when things started to turn around. My manual labor job turned into a real job with real opportunities. As a studio manager for that artist, a friend of a friend freaked out after the World Trade Center attacks and left the city. I took over his super cheap apartment. All the while I was making movies about whatever subject matter I could come up with. I worked with my brother Van. We made movies for anyone that would pay us. Birthday videos, editing actor reels. We literally said yes to anything that involved picking up a camera. And then 2003, I got my first iPod. And when the battery died a year and a half later, I got really pissed off and made a video about their dead battery policy. And I put that online. Now, this was like 3 years before YouTube, but that video exploded. This was back in the day when the word viral was used to describe an STD, not a video.
Casey, it started with you. I got the first iPod, Generation 1, had it for about...
And all of a sudden, people started asking about other movies we had made. In 2004, a video series we had shot in my apartment called Science Experiments was invited to be shown at the Sao Paulo Biennial in Brazil. Things started to get good. I had a little bit of money, and I was able to spend more time with Owen. And for the first time, he and I started taking trips together. What's the pretzel for?
The dolphin.
You're gonna feed the pretzel to the dolphin. Yeah? When we traveled, I felt like I was able to get to know him in a way that was entirely new. When we traveled, it was just us. And I loved that. In 2006, I met this guy named Tom Scott. He ran a group of local TV channels, and he hired Van and me to make some videos. The videos came out great, and he made this big offer to us. He simply said, "I want to bankroll a big project you guys do." Now, I've always understood luck to be where opportunity meets preparation. And this was a big opportunity, and we were certainly prepared. So he agreed to fund us for a year. It wasn't a lot of money, just enough. So my brother Van and I lived and documented stories from our lives. Every couple of weeks, we'd edit these experiences together to form like a 25-minute movie, sort of. Eventually we had 8 of those 25-minute episodes, and we called that a TV series. Then in 2008, we sold that 8-episode TV series to HBO for just under $2 million. It was a big deal. The HBO show premiered in 2010. Then my brother and I stopped working together. I produced a couple of movies, and ultimately I just shifted all of my focus to YouTube. I'd found my voice telling stories with my videos back in that trailer park, and I had finally found an audience for it on the internet. Owen turned 16 a couple months ago. He's taller than me now, he's smarter than me, and he's definitely better looking than me. We've never stopped traveling. I don't think we ever will. And I owe that kid a lot. The first 2 decades of my life were spent being told I was wrong, not fitting in. But this last decade of my life, you know those days when you're in a rush to get somewhere and you catch every green light? That's what it's felt like. I'm 33 years old, and I have no intention of slowing down.
Oh, it's a world of lonely faces. Oh, it's a world of many places. Oh, oh, follow that dream. Oh, it's a world of funny faces. To get home, you have to touch all the bases. Oh, oh, follow that dream. Like flying a kite, you can't lose sight, you can't let go. Oh, oh, follow that dream. Setting sun don't mean the end, though it could. So get the job done.
At the end of high school, I got a job selling rainbow vacuum cleaners, and I was selling them door to door in the Boston suburbs area. And of course, there's a couple places I got thrown out of, and other places where they bought 2. It was a fantastic introduction to selling, and luckily, I still went to college. The lucky break of my life was getting into Stanford graduate school in computer science in '86. In the past, I had never met entrepreneurs, and I had put them on a pedestal like they were godlike in all these ways. And so it really helps to be around some of them to see they're regular people with a good idea. The thing I took away was if they can do it, I can do it. And I worked at a startup for 2 years. I, like a typical, 25-year-old programmer, had messy desks and lots of old coffee cups, growing various fungi. And I went into work one day really early, and I caught the CEO. I'm cleaning my mugs in the bathroom. And I was like, "Oh, have you been cleaning my mugs all year?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, it was the one thing I could do for you. You do so much for the company." And so I ended up feeling, of course, like, God, I would follow that guy off the ends of the earth. And that's pretty much where he took the company. And I learned so much in that. I realized leadership is pretty nuanced because there's the personally endearing part about character and fellowship. And there's also the strategic part about not leading the company into a box canyon. So it was a really good lesson on it. The time that I started my first company, I was 30, and everyone said, "Oh, I was so young." The fundamental is to be self-aware enough that you want to learn, and you learn through the criticisms and suggestions of others. At Pure Software, the company's culture was not that strong. And that was the beauty for me of getting to start over with Netflix, because I realized that the trick in business is figuring out what scenarios could grow into a material threat, because not all things will kill you. And if you get distracted dealing with every possible threat, you'll be very unfocused. I think of management strategy like chess, where a human chess player has to examine a couple of key strategies, and mostly they're pruning the tree of possibilities. And if you prune correctly, you can see further down than the next person on the relevant paths. From the day we started, we knew DVD was going to die, and we named the business Netflix and not DVDbymail.com. So we had an advantage over Blockbuster that had a really great business in store rentals before it suddenly went away. But I wish we had realized how hard they were going to attack. There was a multi-year battle for survival between Blockbuster and Netflix. One quarter we shrunk because they were basically hitting us on price so hard. We underestimated them to our peril. And honestly, in hindsight, if they had started 2 years earlier, when we were that much smaller, they probably would have won. But they had quite a bit of debt, which constrained their flexibility, and then ran out of money. A great company is like jazz. You want players who can improvise, partially because the climate's constantly changing and you're learning along the way. But you also have to have great judgment, like the chess player. So if you keep your North Star as, how do I make the best product in this category for the people I'm trying to serve, and then not get too distracted, that's probably a good place to be.
In this age of technological revolution, we can hit a button on our phones and in a matter of minutes have groceries at our door, a ride in the driveway, or a place to stay. If you haven't used Airbnb, you probably have heard about it. A host looking to make a few bucks posts a listing for a room or an entire home up on the Airbnb site. A traveler looking for a good deal shops the site and chooses a rental. Renter and host are matched, and Airbnb takes 3% of the price. It's a formula that has made Airbnb one of the most successful and most disruptive companies in the world, with hotels and cities now scrambling to keep up. I stopped by to visit co-founder Brian Chesky, who also is the company's CEO and head of community. Where else but in his Airbnb here in New York?
This is literally just the beginning.
How does a 35-year-old CEO with an estimated personal net worth approaching $4 billion travel the world? By crashing at other people's homes.
Hello, how you doing?
So you're actually staying in this Airbnb rental?
Yeah, I'm here. This is a house in Harlem. My girlfriend and my mom were here last night, and we had food here together, so it's pretty cool. I've literally stayed in hundreds of them. I mean, at one point, I even lived on the website. I gave up my home, and we would go home to home, so it's been a pretty amazing experience.
Airbnb began nearly a decade ago with 3 inflatable air mattresses on the floor of Brian Chesky's living room. Today, the company has 3 million listings in 65,000 cities and 191 countries around the world. It's valued at $30 billion, nearly twice the value of Hilton worldwide.
You mentioned you were perhaps an unlikely business mogul growing up.
Right.
Your high school yearbook quote was a Jerry Seinfeld quote?
Yes. My high school yearbook quote was, "I'm sure I'll amount to nothing." And I remember I put it in. I came home one day. My dad had a copy of the yearbook, and I remember he just shouted, "Nothing!" And I was like, yeah, whatever.
I hope you framed that. There's some irony to that.
Maybe now there is.
Chesky grew up near Albany, New York, the son of 2 social workers. From a young age, he was fascinated by improving things that just didn't seem right to him.
When you were a kid, you would ask for Christmas presents because you didn't like their design.
I was obsessed with this, things like Game Gear and Game Boys and these different devices, and I wanted to redesign them. When I was a really little kid, asked for my dad to buy Disney stock so we could get the Disney annual reports, because in the Disney annual reports they had renderings of the new rides and the theme parks, and I could use those renderings and redesign the theme parks. In hindsight, these were slightly peculiar interests.
You think?
Yes, exactly. I guess I've always been obsessed with a better way to design something, and probably first and foremost, a better way to design communities.
So instead of asking to go to Disney World, you were asking for the annual report as a child.
Exactly.
Long before he became one of the leaders of the new economy, Chesky was an artist, a hockey player, even a competitive bodybuilder.
You still jacking some steel? Can you still get it up?
A little bit. When you travel here, man, it is tough to do when you're a CEO.
If the modern playbook for a startup icon includes dropping out of an Ivy League school, Chesky took a different route. He spent his college years at the Rhode Island School of Design. There, he met Joe Gebbia, who later became one of 3 co-founders of Airbnb.
We always thought, design isn't how something looks. Design's how something works. And we had this really simple idea. What if you could go somewhere and feel like you live there?
That simple idea was born of necessity. Chesky had quit his design job and joined Gebbia in San Francisco. Between the two of them, they couldn't pay their first month's rent.
It turns out that weekend, there was this international design conference. All the hotels are sold out. And we had this idea, let's just create a bed and breakfast for the design conference. We pulled the airbeds out of the closet, we inflated them, and we called it the Air Bed and Breakfast.
A light bulb went off, but early skeptics of their idea didn't believe people would invite strangers into their homes. In 2008, without big investors, Chesky and Gebbia began covering their costs by selling breakfast cereal.
And so Joe and I and Nate were totally broke. And one night, we're in a late night in the kitchen, we're Air Bed and Breakfast. Air beds aren't selling very well. Maybe we'll go into breakfast cereal. And then we ended up selling Barack Obama themed cereal. We called it Obama O's, the breakfast of change. We also did John McCain themed cereal, Captain McCain's. And that was actually how we funded the company. In fact, today we say we're like serial entrepreneurs with a twist.
Hi, I'm Brian Chesky. I'm a co-founder at Airbnb.com.
Their scrappiness caught the attention of one of the company's first investors, right around the time the economy was crashing.
We haven't made any money. And Paul Graham said that it's like an investment nuclear winter, and I'm looking for people that won't die. He said, in fact, you guys are like cockroaches. You just won't die. That's when it started taking off. And the idea literally spread city by city, block by block. It grew as a network.
With Airbnb's rapid expansion, from 120,000 listings in 2011 to 3 million today, regulators in many cities are struggling to handle the boom in short-term rentals.
We're sitting in a beautiful home in New York City, which is one of many cities that's passed laws or regulations to try to restrict Airbnb's ability to operate here. What is your answer to critics who say it's bad for affordable housing?
The story of most people in our community is people that are average income who depend on the money to get by. And the average person is renting the home they live in.
Airbnb recently launched a new division called Experiences. Travelers can book a stay that comes with a local experience, like surfing with Adventure Man in LA, finding Zen in San Francisco, or learning from a samurai artist in Tokyo.
I think one of the things you and others have found is that especially younger customers are seeking these experiences.
Yes.
They don't want to accumulate things as much as life experiences. How did you tap into that?
I think there was this shift that happened where when I was a kid, the American dream was to have like a nice house and 2 cars. I think the rise of social media changed it, because suddenly people started valuing experiences more.
A new experience launching this month in New York, a partnership with an urban farm called Harlem Grown. Rent a room and spend a day helping out.
Have you seen in your research, Brian, that customers want more of this kind of experience?
They don't want to just see the Eiffel Tower, or they don't want to see the Statue of Liberty. They want to meet people like Tony. And then you leave, and the memories you have are of people.
What do the next 10 years look like for Airbnb?
And I think where this is going is it's not going to be just a place to stay. We are going to design the end-to-end trip for you. Travel is never really about where you go. It's about who you can become and the memories you can make. And I really want us to be in the business of creating these magical experiences, not just a place to stay.
Brian's advice for you budding entrepreneurs, he says, it's better to have 100 people who love your company than 1 million people who kind of like you. Don't worry about being huge, he says. Worry about doing something that makes a huge difference to a small number of people. Brian also told me the name Airbnb could take on a whole new meaning in the future. To hear his fascinating thoughts on fixing commercial air travel, check out our web extras at today.com/Sunday. And our thanks again to the great people at Harlem Grown. Come see him here in New York.